Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Switch Statement Podcast. It's a podcast for investigations into miscellaneous tech topics.
This is episode 2 in our series on the art of game design by Jesse Schell.
Hey, John, how are you doing?
Hey, Matt, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm excited to get into chapters 2 through 4 today of
Three chapters
of game design. Yes, 3 chapters. We decided we should chunk some of these chapters just so that we're not doing this book for the next 10 years or so.
Yeah.
But like all of the chapters are kind of logically clustered, I would say. So today the idea is like this is about the experience. You know, he talks a lot about experience. And so we're going to be going over the parts where he's kind of explicitly calling out the experience and how it relates to the game. So,
yes. So the 3 chapters we are covering today are Chapter 2, the designer creates an experience. Chapter 3, the experience takes place in a venue. And Chapter 4, the experience rises out of a game.
Very, very evocative titles, keeping with the theme of
man.
like mystery. Like what? It's kind of hard to tell.
He's really like telling a story here. This is
Yeah.
not just a textbook. It's a deep look inside of his
Psyche.
his psyche. Yeah.
Yeah, all of his thoughts about game design. So, but yeah, let's get into it. So the designer creates an experience. What did you think about this chapter? Did you?
This was interesting to me because, I think if you're making games, you're always asking yourself, what is the purpose of a game? And I think this was his attempt to define what the purpose of making a game is. It's to create an experience. It's to cause emotions in the people who are playing your game or interacting with your game, which I think is an interesting way of looking at it. I do think it's debatable. I think you could say there are other reasons to create games, or you could say that there's, maybe this is one reason that's not necessarily debatable, but then there are other reasons, like teaching, for instance, could be a reason. Like there's been games that are about a subject, or like the World War II or something, and it's like a good way to learn more about World War II. Learn about if you're interested in this sort of thing, learn about what the infantrymen were carrying and things like that.
Right. Yeah. So this is one thing that I think is funny because I feel like it's one of those points that it's like so general as to be maybe not even useful, right? Because I think what he would say is like, oh, well, you're still creating experience. You're creating a learning experience,
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you mentioned this because this is why I'm sort of, it probably sounds like I'm dissenting, and I'm not dissenting with the core point, but yeah, I guess I'm arguing that it's almost so nebulous that it's like, what's the value of this? Which is funny because in another chapter, he started bringing up all these quotes about like what a game even is.
Yeah.
A lot of this book is like super philosophical, by the way, and it's like
yes, that's definitely like it's like this philosophical point that he's making, which is like I think a lot of people like yes, they are making a decision about what experience to make, but they're just not doing it explicitly, right? Like and maybe that's his point is like you should take that step back and think about like, oh, okay, yeah, this is the emotions or the experiences that I want my player to have as they're going about the game.
Yeah.
That maybe that's good. Like, I don't think but to your point, like it might not be strictly necessary. Like, I think you can create a really good and fun game, even if you haven't thought at all about like or looked at it through the lens of essential experience or.
I would be very interested to talk with like a panel of game designers because I think a lot of game designers just design from their own personal tastes. And yeah, of course, you're listening to people who are playing your game and you're iterating and you're taking into account their feedback and stuff. But I don't think that they're sitting down and critically thinking about like some experience they're trying to impart to other human beings. They're mainly just drawing from their own like personal experience.
He has a really good and like, well, I'm going to lead with the quote and I'll talk about my thoughts about it later. But he says, "It is true that many designers do not use the lens of a central experience. They just kind of follow their gut instinct and stumble across game structures that happen to enable experiences that people enjoy."
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, dude, like, I think you have a lot of really good, like, wisdom to impart, but that's a little dismissive, right? It's like the tone there is a little bit too, like, oh, like, they're just fumbling around in the dark, and sometimes, you get pearls
it's
before
silly.
swine.
I think it's also missing like an extremely important part of game design and storytelling in general, which is like humans want personal stories. Like I want to hear a story that you have to tell. Like this is part of what being human is. You're sitting around and just telling each other stories. And to a certain extent, that can be what a game is. Like literally just someone relaying some deeply personal story, whether or not they format it in a way of mechanics or whatever. There was a game recently. It's like a platformer where you're climbing a mountain and you're sort of like defeating these inner demons. Oh, it was a super popular game. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
No, I'm not great about being up on
man.
like modern
Celeste.
reading.
It's called Celeste.
That's crazy because I have played Celeste, but
Anyway, Celeste is like just this deeply personal experience, but it's wrapped in this like amazing platforming mechanics that, everyone loves playing games like that. So I don't know. I feel like it's missing one of the points of being a designer, which is it's okay to be deeply personal and to draw from like your own personal experience and how you feel about things.
yeah, I don't think looking at it through the lens of a central experience means that it doesn't wind up being personal. But I see your point that like it's okay if it is just stream of consciousness from the designer's perspective.
Yeah, I think what I would argue is that it can be.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not disagreeing with anything he's saying. I think he's absolutely right. And I also think he is providing this like kind of objective way of looking at games, which I really like. But at the same time, I think there's, a million ways to skin a cat, and some people do it, very differently than what he's talking about.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing that I disagree with the most is that he feels maybe a little bit overly dismissive of that approach. So
Right. Yeah, it's almost like he's saying that you're wrong if you're doing that, which I disagree with.
Yeah.
So there was a couple little quotes in here that I thought were pretty interesting. First of all, this guy has the most amazing quotes. Like I feel like he's read the entire universe of books.
Yeah.
Because he's quoting like, Thomas Edison, he's quoting Edgar Allan Poe. There was a programmer quote that I'll mention later because I love this quote. But this was actually a quote from him. It was just in the midst of his own writing. He said, "Without experience, the game is worthless." Which I just thought was interesting because, I mean, at least speaking from my own experience, I've made a few games that like literally no one has ever played. And, I wonder about the worth of those. Like I tell myself that they help me grow as a game creator or as a programmer or whatever. But I also think about games that not a lot of people played. Or it's like, I think using total experience as a way to measure the value of a game is a little flawed to me. Because I think there's a lot of games that only, like Dwarf Fortress, I think is an example of a game where it's played by a very loyal niche. And you could argue like, oh, Call of Duty is more valuable to culture than Dwarf Fortress. But I don't know. I mean, I think that's a very debatable thing. Like, I don't think total experience is a good metric for measuring the value of a game.
Yeah, I almost think of it as it's almost binary. It's like you just like show it to people. Like the game becomes valuable once someone has a good experience playing the game. You know what I mean? It's almost like, because like short of someone actually playing the game, like, okay, we had that little puzzle game, Space Room. It's like, I would argue that has zero value as a game right now because no one has ever played that game. Right? It's like, so it's almost just like if we released it to the App Store and a couple of people downloaded it and like we got a 3-star review, it's almost like now it has value because someone tried it out, and like, you know, like it just becomes so muddy if you try to compare like the apples of Call of Duty to the oranges of Dwarf Fortress.
Right. Well, and maybe I'm conflating his point with other points that I've heard, which is like a game sells more, it's a better game, which is just so patently false. And maybe he's saying more along the lines of what you're saying, where it's like, unless you're getting your game out there and some people are experiencing it other than your own tunnel vision self, which I think is totally true. That's like a very true point.
That's what I'm taking from it. Like, because I think that's the most useful lesson from the, you know, through the lens as a game designer to take away from, you know, I think that's the most useful interpretation essentially. So that's kind of how I'm choosing to interpret it. So, okay, one little comment that I just got a kick out of. He says, ultimately, a game designer does not care about games. And I was like, it was just another one of those points where it's like, okay, in its purest sense, maybe that's the case. But like,
yeah,
if you just look at it through a rational lens, that's clearly not true.
Yeah, it's silly. I think that he does like to, I don't know, like deal in absolutes or have these like very pithy statements. And and I feel like when I read statements like that, I mean, our entire like career is like reading past, you know, these high level statements, which are missing, you know, the real details underlying them.
Yeah.
And I think that I just have this immediate like spidey sense that goes off like, this is total BS. But there's definitely an underlying truth to like a lot of what he's saying. But yeah, he's rolling stuff up into these like platitudes, which kind of bother me.
One thing I wanted to say was there's that whole section about self-awareness. And that just struck me as like very cart before the horse. He's like, oh, this is how you introspect about what you're feeling about a game. And I was like, there's no game. Like, we don't, like, there's nothing to dissect. It's not like this isn't useful in this context because we don't have anything to introspect about yet. Like, I feel like there's a whole section about playtesting, and I think, like, he should have just cut it from there and put it in playtesting because we're not there yet.
Are you talking about the dissecting your feelings
Dissecting your feelings, yeah.
Because that was actually my favorite section in the chapter, because I feel like that, like, first of all, a lot of people talk about modern games and they say like, oh, modern games suck. Like, you know, this game from 10 years ago is better than modern games, but they can't put it into words as to why. You know, and some people talk about like, you know, just for instance, like Skyrim, you know, has such it holds your hand and takes you through these quests and puts little markers on your map and tells you exactly where to go. And then you have a game that just came out like Elden Ring, where it's just completely open world. You do whatever you want to do. You might stumble into like the last boss and he just like kills you instantly. You know, and there's basically some games that have gone really hard in the direction of like trying to prevent you from making these frustrating mistakes. Mm-hmm. And yeah, but like opinions are very divided on like, what should a game be? Like, should it be this, you know, exploration where you can make mistakes, or should it be this like, you know, really fun, no sharp edges,
like a Rails, like something, like an experience on Rails. Yeah,
exactly. But people just have trouble, I think, dissecting their own feelings and putting these sorts of things into words. So I thought, I don't know, I really like that idea, or that sort of approach to thinking about games, is just truly sitting down and like pulling your feelings apart. I wrote down that there's a lot of parallels with music, which is something I've thought a lot about. Like, I grew up playing piano, and I always wondered why some piano players just seem to have like something better. Like, I think some piano players read the notes on the page and just put their fingers where they should go. But then there's other piano players who like really listen to themselves, and they can actually like create something more beautiful and more musical. And I think that it's a similar thing where they're dissecting their own feelings. They're actually, not only are they like experiencing what's happening, but they're also like, you know, they're critically thinking
Observing
about
it, yeah.
they're observing it, and they're trying to figure out either what's wrong with it or what they like or dislike about it, and trying to make it as good as possible. And it's just so important to music, and I think it's also important to games.
It's interesting with music, and like I don't want to go on too long of a tangent here, but I feel like there's a point you start learning a piece and you're like, what do the notes say? And then you almost get to a point where you're like, you know what the notes say, but now you're like, what did the author mean? Like there's this higher level where you're like, after playing for a little while, you're like, oh, okay, what they probably wanted wasn't exactly what they wrote, but like because of the way the limits of expression of, you know, writing anything, you know, it may not fully be expressed there, but you can almost kind of get a sense like, oh, you know what, this is probably what they meant for this section, and so I'm going to play it like a little bit differently than what's strictly written. But
exactly. No, I love that point, because the notes on the page are an abstraction.
Yeah,
it's, you know, music is impossible to express, and notes on a page are actually a pretty poor way to express it. There's also an element of what do you want to say in music, which a lot of people like intentionally try not to say anything in music, especially classical musicians, which, you know, I appreciate sometimes, but there's just so much more to it than the notes on the page. And I think there's a similar thing in gaming where there's so much more to it than just sitting down and like playing a game and finishing it.
Right. But this almost kind of leads to the next section, I think, because so the next chapter is called "The Experience Takes Place in a Venue."
Yes.
Which, I don't know about you, but this is 100% not what I thought this chapter was going to be about.
Yeah, no, me neither.
And so just to explain, like when he's talking about a venue, he's not talking about the setting of the game, which is what I initially thought that like was what this chapter was about. He's talking about the context that the player is playing the game in, which I think kind of goes, you know, and to tie this back just as a last final point to what we were just talking about, like it's like what is the goal of the player? Like is, you know, in the context of music, like is the goal of the player to like play this super rigidly as like this super technical thing, play it exactly correct, or is it to have a little fun with it? Is it kind of like, is the goal to be more playful? And so the parallels here are like he goes through this list of a bunch of different things, which I don't think it makes sense for us to like list all of them now, but nor could I from the top of my head.
I don't even remember most of them.
But like there's one where he talks about the hearth. You know, the hearth is like, and it's an archetype of a location where, and he chooses like this very like kind of anachronistic representation, but it's basically like you're in your living room like with one or two other people and you're playing a game together with them. That's like the hearth, and that's the context. Like, are you designing a game to be played with like a couple of people in like a very lighthearted atmosphere? And then you can
like
kind
Mario
of
Party.
Right, Mario Party or GoldenEye or something like that.
GoldenEye, man.
And then he kind of contrasts that with like the Workbench, which is like, this is a game where you're playing it solo, and it's like, it's almost close to a job. Like it's very intense, you know. Maybe you're playing StarCraft and like you're trying, I've never played StarCraft, so
your actions per minute are
like you've got your APMs on your screen somewhere, and like you're dipping below 200 and you're like, oh, like I gotta go faster. I think there's kind of a parallel there with what we were just talking about. So
totally, I totally agree. This was interesting because going back to what you said about this chapter not being what I expected at all, like I had just never thought about this, which is crazy that I've never thought about this, but I don't know, it was really informative. Like, because I like throughout this chapter, I was thinking about myself. Like there's certain types of games I will almost never play. I've also sort of changed as a gamer. Like you brought up GoldenEye. I probably put hundreds of hours into GoldenEye with like friends growing up. But now I'm almost entirely like a workbench gamer. Like I almost feel like I'm like ashamed of my gaming now. I mean, I'm not really, like I talk about my gaming all the time, but like I do it in such privacy. And like if my Steam friends thing goes online, I'm like, oh shoot, and I turn it off, like I go offline because I just don't want anyone, talking to me while I'm playing games. And I just thought this was interesting because I just haven't really thought about that aspect of myself and how I've changed. I basically changed from like a hearth gamer to a workbench gamer as I've grown up, and it was weird.
This is, I think, the real value of this book, because this guy has looked at games from every single freaking angle.
Yes.
And it's like, it's not that you need to, but it's like, here's a frame to think about this game through that you've probably made implicit decisions about before, but like, be explicit about about your decision making for this.
Yeah, he's putting so many things into words that might have like flitted through my mind at one point, but I just didn't have the vocabulary to like really even think about them.
Right.
And
right,
I'm very much appreciating that because I think it's just, it's going to give me a lot of new lenses to look at what I'm doing through. Man, I cannot use the word lenses anymore. It's terrible.
I've given up. I'm just leaning into it, and I'm just saying some of the lenses. Like if you hear me say lens, I'm going to try to tie it to the lens that he is talking about in the section.
So this is like a total tangent, but I just thought this part was hilarious. He talked about how staring into a fire is an evolved trait. And I just found that to be, I don't know. It's like, I feel like if I was writing this book, I would just not put something like that in it because it felt like such kind of pseudoscience, like not well thought out.
This this is one thing I will say about these chapters is like I'm getting like a fluffy feeling a little bit about these chapters, and like that's okay. And I think there's a lot of really good value. And actually, he kind of brings it back a little bit with the third chapter because I think there's some pretty like there's some rigor in that third chapter insofar like as much as possible with trying to precisely define a term, which is like just a very hard problem. But I've definitely been like, okay, my fluff alarms are like jingling a little bit. Like,
which I need to just ignore those for this book. This book is written in a different way than I'm used to. I'm used to reading just these highly technical textbooks. And I'm actually glad that this isn't like those because those are super boring and annoying. But but anyway, he's just including a lot of like little anecdotes and stuff, which are kind of interesting. But as for the third chapter, so he's talking about defining a game, and I did think this was hilarious because after reading the first chapter, where he sort of put this super high level statement on like what being a game designer is. He then starts sort of poking holes in these other super high level statements. Mm. And it almost seemed contradictory to me. Like it was like, bro, you just made like a very similar, like overarching nebulous statement about what being a designer is. And now you're like, tearing apart all these other quotes about it. It just seemed kind of interesting.
Right. I think he acknowledges that any definition of game design is going to be, or a game or any of these terms is going to be incomplete. And he basically says, like, if they clarified things for you, this is what he says at the end of the chapter. If they clarified things for you or you find those terms useful, great. If not, that's even better because you're going to have to define your own terms. And that means you're thinking, and thinking is good. So I think he knows that, like, this isn't one be all end all definition for a game or what a game is, but
he knows. But I did like this chapter. I thought it was really interesting because basically the format of the chapter was he would throw out a quote that describes what games are, and then he would just discuss the quote and either, I don't think he thinks any of the quotes are wrong or right, but each quote just kind of looked at gaming through a different lens, and so he would just discuss that lens. Thought it was very interesting.
He had a great quote, which actually it's one of the few quotes that's actually not about games in this chapter, but it was, "The beginning of wisdom is a definition of terms." And I was just like mind blown. And that's Socrates. And it's like,
dude, Noam Chomsky would love that one.
That's deep. I feel like it's like, that's kind of amazing that Socrates was thinking about the concept of starting from this definition of terms. But if I go back to game development, or just even any software development,
that's what I was going to bring up.
Agreeing on a set of terms or this nomenclature is so freaking important, because this is where the largest bugs come from, is when two people are saying the same word or using the same term, and it's not clear what that actually means. So you don't realize it, but there's two separate understandings in both people's heads, and then you think you agreed. We're gonna build the Schnargen, and person A has a completely definition of what a Schnargen is from person B.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be conflict, because it's like, wait, I thought we agreed. It's like, I did build the Schnargen, and then,
Totally. No, it's so easy to talk past each other in software, and it's so important to lay out a vocabulary at the outset. And so many people don't do that because, I don't know. Yeah, software also has this thing where, people don't want to get caught in that RTFM trap where they ask some stupid question in a meeting and someone just says oh, that's already documented somewhere.
Yeah.
Why are you asking in the meeting? And I think it's just a major downfall to software development. But yeah, the Socrates quote was awesome, especially after that whole reincarnation thing from, I think it was a different chapter where they talked about how Socrates thought that, whenever you're learning something new, you feel like you already knew it,
yes,
from long ago. And his conclusion from that was that everyone is just reincarnated.
Yeah.
And we're sort of remembering things that we had already learned in a past life.
Right, and that was his point about you can't learn everything from just thinking really hard about it.
Right.
That was
exactly. Yeah.
All right, so let's stop beating around the bush. Let's just get to the meat of the matter. What did you think of his definition of what a game is?
What was his definition of what a game is?
Yeah, so let's read it out for the listeners
and for me
and for John. No, John knows what it is.
I did the reading. No, I mean I did do the reading. I just forget the exact wording.
A game is a problem-solving activity approached with a playful attitude.
Ah, that's right. Okay, so he started with a game as a problem-solving activity. And then,
which I think is a terrible definition.
Yes, it's a very terrible definition. It is funny because the chapter did so much talking about, what a game is, and they gave all these great examples and talked about all these great quotes from other people, all of which I did feel were missing something.
Yeah.
And then he came out with his definition, which I just thought was a little bit underwhelming.
Yeah. No, I agree. And to your point, he comes up with these 10 commandments of what a game is supposed to be, which I think are great. I think that they're discrete, and each one kind of lists this very specific thing that is useful to think about. And then he just munges them all together, I guess, for no good reason as far as I'm concerned. So
it's, it's funny because I think, you just cannot define what a game is. It's so many things.
Yeah.
It's, sometimes they're not even fun. Sometimes they feel like a chore. Sometimes, it takes years to fully understand. There's just such a wide gamut. I was almost hoping that he ended the chapter with that thought. At the end of the day, it's just impossible to define a game. We can describe a bunch of discrete elements of what a game could be, but we're not going to be able to define a game in a single sentence. And
right. And any attempt to is actually probably just not really worth your time.
Right. It's just always going to be missing something important.
Not to mention that if we're trying to tie this back to the process of game design at the end of the day, it's like, is not having a strict definition of a game like stopping you for like, are you having these philosophical like crises? Like, is what I'm making a game or not? Like, no, it's like,
Yeah.
it's like, it doesn't even matter. And it's funny because I have heard about these things in the past where people are like, is this even a game? But it's like, I don't know. I go back to what he was talking about in the first chapter, which is it's about the experience. And like,
Yeah.
if it's bringing out the experience that you care about and you want, then don't even worry about classifying it.
Right.
So.
Like, I would compare it to music again, which I keep doing that, but it's not like musicians sit down to write a piece and they're like, okay, let's first define what music is. Like, they don't care.
Right.
Like,
Right.
they understand that music is just this completely ineffable thing. And, you know.
I absolutely love that parallel. I think
Hans Zimmer is
perfect.
just like,
Yeah,
"Oh,
he's like,
I can't write the score for this yet. I got to define what music is. But by the way, I applaud you. Earlier, you had a very complete sentence while my dog was barking in the background, which we are probably going to cut the sound of my dog barking out. But I still want the listener to know that in spite of that barking, you kept your cool and had like a very cogent thought.
it's really useful that Aggie does not bark in English. That would have made it much harder for me to do. But
Yeah, instead she barks in horrid screaming beagle noises.
beagle sounds.
Yeah.
I think that's enough philosophizing, or actually maybe like over philosophizing bashing. We're trying to like
Yeah.
avoid it.
You know, I feel like I bash this book a lot, but I do want to just say that I'm excited about this book. Like, I'm enjoying reading it. It's really fun. I'm really excited about some of the chapters that are coming up because they're, you know, just looking at the chapter titles, they sound very interesting. So I'm going to bash the book, but I do like the book.
Let's take this opportunity. We'll switch gears. We'll get back into our game.
Yes.
Just to pick up where we left off. At the end of the last episode, it sounded like the direction we were hinting at, which I don't want to say that this is absolutely what we're going to go with. Not to mention that having read the chapters since, all of what we were talking about last time feels completely premature. You know, so now we need to kind of reconsider.
Yeah, is this a
everything.
hearth game? Is it a workbench game?
Right, exactly. Like, what kind of experience do we want to like? Do we want to encourage delight? You know, we made that classic blunder of just immediately thinking about mechanisms and not thinking about what kind of experience we want to enable in our players.
Yes.
But anyway, so just to summarize, it sounded like we landed on something where there was characters on a board. Like, there would be kind of an interesting board mechanism where you would be able to have characters interact with each other, and maybe they would have special abilities. And that's pretty much all we had kind of pinned down. But yeah, I mean, I think we need to take a step back and say, like, what kind of experience would that afford our users?
Yeah.
What context would it be? Yeah, so let me turn that around. Like, what do you would that be a hearth game or?
Yeah, I mean, I'm imagining a board game. So
Yeah.
I think that means that it would be more in the hearth territory where you're kind of sitting around with friends. I don't want to make some super deep Axis and Allies game where it takes 5 hours to play and
Yes.
even longer to learn. I love games where they're mechanically very simple. You can kind of pick them up very quickly. I don't want a game that's too stressful. I also don't want a game that's too skill-based. You know, like chess or something where it's just 100% like your skill versus theirs, because those are too stressful in my opinion.
Yeah, I do like, and I'm glad you brought this up. I like games that do include some luck in them.
Yeah,
yeah. I think, you know, chess is like a little bit intimidating where, it's just a battle of like raw mental, force.
Totally. I need to be in a very specific mood to play chess. And I also realize, like, I don't even like playing chess with friends because it's like, I don't know. I just feel like I'm in this weird competition with like a single friend for this, for this time that we're playing. And I don't know. It's just annoying. So yeah, I think having some luck is also great because you can blame bad luck when you lose, which I love.
I really like collaborative games. Like, I feel like Pandemic is one of the games I've had the most fun with.
Yes.
And Just One, that's another one where it's like, there's still conflict. And like, you can still be like, oh, like, you're an idiot. Like, why did you do that? And there can still be like a little bit of like playful competition in a way.
Yeah.
But like, it's with yourselves versus like the challenge versus like trying to like compete with each other.
Yeah, Just One is great because there's so much individual personality in that game. You know, like, I feel like our words will always be these like really obscure things that
Very arcane.
only the two of us understand.
Just so everyone understands, Just One is a very simple game, and I need to either get way better at describing how games work, or
This is probably a great exercise for a designer, is to quickly describe how a game works.
Right. So here's okay. This is my challenge. I'm gonna have like 10 seconds. So, Just One. The goal is to get a person to guess a particular word, just one word. And the way, the tool that you have to do that is you can write a one-word clue for them. So everyone's all playing on one collaborative team. It's multiple players, and then one person is the guesser. All of the other people are the clue givers. And then the trick is that the clue givers come up with their clues without the guesser knowing. They confer. And if any of the clue givers gave the same clue, that clue is not shown to the guesser.
Right.
So then, the mechanism here is like, if you try to give way too obvious a clue, like basically all of the easy clues are off limits to you because you're just going to assume someone else is going to give those clues. And so you really need to think outside the box.
Yeah, and there's a very interesting, I kind of want to call it a zero-sum game where you're thinking to yourself like, oh, I need to pick this really obscure word. But meanwhile, the other people are thinking, I need to pick a really obscure word. And every once in a while, like, two people pick the same obscure word, which is hilarious because it probably wouldn't have been a good clue in the first place.
The bigger problem is just that people pick like completely worthless clues just so that it's not a basic thing.
Right.
So, but anyway, so the important point is like it is a collaborative game, which I like. The other thing I wanted to point out is there's also one arena which is called the gaming table. So, and I didn't feel like I had a good understanding of what the difference between the gaming table and the hearth was. Did you?
So, and yeah, maybe that's a good point. Maybe this would be a gaming table game. I thought the gaming table was more for like just slightly higher weight games or higher difficulty, maybe like Settlers of Catan or something, which is a great game. I enjoy that game, but it's not easy to play. It's not like Just One, where you can literally play it in 10 minutes. It's super fun. You can play it with any group of friends, even if people don't understand the game. So
I think it's kind of the difference between, and I know that GoldenEye isn't played around a gaming table, but it's kind of like the difference between Wii Sports and GoldenEye or something, where it's like, okay, you're still playing with friends, or maybe there is certain contexts where you might play competitively, but it's not like something you would play like with your grandma or something.
Right. So, I mean, this is a good question though, is like how, because, we've discussed a few ideas and it did sound like there could be like somewhat complex mechanics that we're interested in.
Exactly.
So do we, maybe this is a gaming table game actually.
What do we want?
Yeah, let's discuss the actual mechanics. And none of this is set in stone, but like we've talked about having a grid of tiles that, the game is composed of a grid of tiles. Mm-hmm. Each tile might be some form of like land, like a plain or like a forest or something like that. And we threw out the idea of having like gods at all four sides of the gaming table, like a northwest, east, south. And we haven't like gone deep into these ideas, but the gods can affect the tiles in a way. Like maybe there's a fire god or something, and if he is activated, then flame like kind of floods across the grid. And as the flame touches each tile, it affects the tile in a way. So if it's a forest, you can imagine the forest burns down and it becomes, I don't know, a desert or something else. And the players are trying to achieve goals, but obviously they can be stymied by these gods, and maybe the other players can activate the gods to kind of get in the way. But you mentioned cooperative games. Maybe this could be a cooperative game where all the players are trying to accomplish some set of goals, but the gods are activated like by the game itself. Kind of.
I think it would be hilarious for it to be like players versus the gods.
Yeah. I totally agree. Like as you were saying the cooperative thing, I was like, I completely reframed the game, and I actually like it better, I think.
And it's kind of amusing to me where it's like, no, gods are real, and you're actually trying to do things like against the gods,
or just the thought that the gods are just jerks for like no reason,
or they're just like amoral, right? And they just are doing things, and it's not like they're bad. Like maybe they could do something that aligns with your goals, or maybe they'll do something that like screws everything up, but like. They don't care, but like you have to deal with what they're doing.
And I feel like a lot of the mechanics we talked about, like, praying, for instance, in order to like somewhat positively affect the gods, like these are still useful mechanics. I can imagine you pray really hard and maybe you skip like a god phase. Kind of like in Pandemic, you could like skip the like virus phase. So I think, I don't know, there's just a lot of really interesting mechanics. And I absolutely love cooperative games. So if we can make one, I would be all for that.
I do. I am really liking this idea. And I think the thing that I would like for us to iron out is what are the goals?
Yeah.
Like, what is an example? So one game that we had brought up that is similar structurally to this game is a game, like, I'm assuming no one's going to know it, but it's a card game called Eye of Judgment, which was an augmented reality card game for the PlayStation 3, and there would be this grid of 3x3 tiles, and then each one could have like an affiliation.
Yeah.
And there was monsters that you could summon to the field. So the goal was very simple. You wanted to control more than half the board, which I think, like, one thing I will say about that game is they kept things very simple.
Yeah.
Like, I think they did a good job of like paring down complexity. It's like, no, you're just supposed to control 5 out of the 9 tiles, and this is played head to head.
Right.
And I don't know. Maybe that could be. Maybe it's like. Maybe the story is you're trying to create a civilization.
Yeah. Really like that. Yeah.
And then the goal. Okay. What about this? The goal is you need to achieve like a certain level of advancement.
Yeah. You need to hit the Iron Age. It's kind of like Age of Empires.
And so like there could be all these disasters, and then like you're not sure what's going to happen, but like you need to like do things to defend against them. And if you reach the Iron Age by like the end of turn 10, then you
win.
You win. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. I really like the idea of having a bunch of like priorities, and it's almost like you have a list of goals that you can achieve. And at any given moment, you can say, oh, I can really quickly achieve this little goal. This little goal is only 1 Iron Age point, but still that'll help us. Maybe this other goal is like 7 Iron Age points, but it's like difficult to achieve. It's going to take, a lot more planning and stuff. And it's a lot easier to just, for the gods to like destroy it or whatever. Maybe it's like build a wonder, and, any little thing could happen that could destroy the wonder. So it's kind of a high risk, high reward proposition. But yeah, I like that sort of game where, at any given moment, you just might have multiple priorities that the team is focusing on.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about there's another aspect of this, which is like fragility. Like maybe like maybe there's something that costs a certain amount to build, and then it's worth a certain amount of victory points, but then there's also like a strength that it has. So it's like, okay, you could build something, it's not that expensive and it's worth a lot.
Yeah.
But actually, like, any god could just destroy it. You're just like, it's like you're taking this risky bet of, let me just build this. Anyone could smite it at a moment's notice, and then it's immediately worthless. But like, it doesn't cost that much. Or you could try to build these more stable structures, which are like more resistant to certain forms of, smiting.
Yes.
And then, which I feel like, I don't know, that's a little bit different than other games and maybe that's too complicated, but
I like that. Yeah, I do feel like some of these ideas are getting into complex territory, but I don't know. Let's keep throwing stuff at the wall, see what sticks.
If I'm understanding you correctly, it sounds like we're leaning more in the gaming table realm, where like we're okay with introducing some more complicated structures.
Yeah, I agree. It sounds like we're just interested in having a game that's a little bit more complicated. Some mechanics that you need to learn.
Yeah, I like that. And, as much as I do like games that are so simple, like just one, like, also, I'm just like a nerd for mechanics.
Yeah,
too,
me too.
So I think we've made some good decisions. I'm good in this direction. I'd be curious, do you feel like you're willing to lock in? Or do you want to do more, like even a more expansive search, like we kind of want to entertain other ideas?
No, I think this stuff that we've laid out, I would be okay with kind of locking in. I mean, the other thing is we got to design this game within the course of this podcast, so we can't spend too much time, sort of navel gazing and throwing ideas around. So let's lock this in. We got a grid, we got some gods, it's cooperative, you're trying to achieve goals. We don't know any of the details of what the goals are or what the gods can do, but these core concepts I think are really good.
Yeah, I think I'm really liking the direction that we're going. So let's keep moving in that direction.
Love it.
All right, so I think that's going to wrap this episode up. And next week, we're going to really dive in heads first at the raw mechanisms of the game. I think these are going to be our favorite chapters,
yes,
I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, tune in to check that out.
All right, see you, Matt.
All right, see you next time, John.